Hi and welcome. I'm Greg Parsons. I'm the Global Business Development Manager for Process Automation, Parts and Repair. We're here today to talk about the parts fingerprint process that we follow, and you'll see that it's a very familiar process of assess, implement, and sustain. And we'll run through these briefly. So under assess, we capture the detailed system configuration for the customer, and of specific importance is that we capture it down to the part number level. We then audit the quantity of the parts and most importantly the quality. So a field engineer or an ABB personnel will go through and they'll follow our audit forms and they'll capture part number, description, what are the boxes opened, if there's any items that may need tested. Any information about that part we'll capture and add to Service Pro. We then categorize all of that against risk, and that's ranked in 3 levels at this point. That's low, which has no effect to the process, medium, which could affect the process, or high risk, which definitely affects the process. Under implementation, then, we take that data and we analyze the full supply chain. So we look at the local inventories and all the way back through the feeder factory inventories. We then create a collaborative action plan that involves the service responsible role at site, any of the field engineers, service sales personnel, the parts people in the region, but with the customer we put together a very collaborative action plan and then we follow through on all of those actions. Okay, so we'd like to run you through the features and benefits. The features of the program is we run through and we look at the spares and documentation, and we go through and we validate all of those part numbers and provide a report to the customer with that information. That's very important to improve their purchasing efficiencies, and our customer service groups around the globe benefit from accurate information supplied to them by the customers. We go through and we look at the historical purchasing patterns and look for opportunities to use past behavior to predict future performance and save downtime for the customer. We look at historical usage and try and identify opportunities for savings in the future. We do the inventory risk assessment and gap analysis that very directly affects both the preventative and corrective maintenance that we provide to the customers. And all of our spares recommendations for customers are looking at purchases efficiencies and trying to identify any cost reduction or opportunities that we have for the customer. So here we'll introduce you to the concept. The Parts Fingerprint has 3 levels of reports. The first is a recommended spares report, which is, as it describes, it's a very basic list of the recommended parts, and we'll run you through all the programs. The gap analysis is the second level of service, which takes the recommended spares and compares that to the inventory at the customer site and tries to look for opportunities there. Those 2 levels of report are delivered from Service Pro. So the supply analysis is actually delivered through the Service Operations Center. We try to do a proposal up front for the service to the customer that includes the field service labor to go out and capture the configuration, and then the audit and any of the parts detail that will be delivered as a part of the report. So let's run through those programs and see what each one looks like here. Running across the headers, a recommended spares list has the part number, the description, how many the customer has installed, and then the risk level. You can run these reports either by unique risk level or combine them and run the low and the medium and the high in one report and deliver that to the customer. So the second level is the gap analysis. This is where we take the same information that's in the recommended spares report and now we include the information from the spares audit. So we'll look at the part number, the description, the risk level, how many they have installed in the customer equipment. We now have the data from the audit, so we know how many spares they have on hand, and then we compare that to the recommendation that Service Pro generates. And let's talk about that recommendation for a moment. So the recommendation starts with a percentage of the installed base, but it also then includes 2 other additional factors. It includes the risk, so a high-risk item will return a higher result than maybe a low-risk item. And then it also looks at life cycle. So as you would guess, later life cycle items return higher recommendations than active items. All of that information then is combined into our final analysis and compared to identify any gaps or excess inventory the customer has on hand. The highest level then becomes the supply analysis. And again, this is delivered in the Service Operations Center, not in Service Pro. This is where we take all of that information now and we compare that to the ABB supply chain. So an example I often use is in a local country, the first line of defense is the inventory that they have located in that country. So we want to compare the gaps that the customer has to that inventory. We need to also compare that to the full ABB supply chain. So we need to look at any of the regional inventories or even the main factory locations. So consider an example of a customer that has QCS, DCS, and drives in his configurations. So maybe his QCS would go back to Hong Kong. His DCS might go back to Sweden Logistics, and his drives may go to Finland. In the Service Operations Center tool, we're able to combine his gaps versus the safety stocks in all of those inventory locations. The goal of doing all of this, of course, is to sit down with all of that information in one report and go line by line with the customer and come up with recommendations that reduce his risk. So let's talk about some of those recommendations. While this is primarily a parts program, it's not exclusively a parts program. We want to look, of course, at identification, and we want to sell new parts or refurbish parts to a customer. But we also want to look at any repair opportunities that are out there. We want to look at testing if they've got a significant amount of their inventory that's opened or unknown. We want to look at any of the preventative maintenance kits that are an opportunity to include into their inventories. We want to look at inventory consolidations. If they've got excess inventory, we may offer a buyback. We also then want to extend that to look at service upgrades and really even all the way through system replacement opportunities if the situation with the parts is that dire. So let's talk about the products now. Before you see our standard chart of products that ABB Process Automation offers, and we've kind of reordered this a little bit to focus on control system, quality control, web imaging, drives, and measurement products. Those are the typical PA products that are included in contracts. You're able to do a parts fingerprint on any ABB product. I thank you for your time. If you have any additional questions, please follow the links at the bottom of the screen and reach out and contact me. I'm more than happy to help at any time. Thank you for your time.